The sun hung low over the Texas horizon, casting long shadows across the dry brush and cracked earth. Dust swirled with every breeze, clinging to the faded cotton dress Clara wore as she stepped out of the house with a tin cup in hand. The water. And it was precious, barely cool, barely clean, but it was the last of what remained from the morning's well pull. And she wasn't taking it to her children or to herself. She was taking it to the dying man lying just beyond their fence line. Clara had found him by accident, hidden among the mesquite and tumbleweed while tending to the chickens. His face was bloodied, clothes torn, and one leg twisted unnaturally. He didn't speak, only groaned when she knelt beside him. She'd run back to the house, filled the tin cup, and slipped past the window where her husband Jed sat drinking whiskey and mumbling curses to himself. She knew better than to test Yet's temper. But she also knew what it was like to be left for dead. When Clara knelt beside the stranger again and lifted the cup to his parched lips, his eyes fluttered open. He was young, not more than 30, and though pain covered his face, something deeper flickered in his gaze. A flicker of thanks. Of life. "Easy now," Clara whispered, helping him sip. "You're not gonna die. Not today." But her words were too hopeful. She hadn't seen Jed watching from the porch. The screen door slammed behind him like a shot. "What the hell are you doing, Clara?" She stood slowly, hiding the cup behind her skirt. "He's hurt, Jed. Looks like he was robbed. We can't just leave him out here." Yet's face twisted with rage. "The hell we can't. That ain't our problem. You wasting our water on some half-dead nobody? He could be a rustler." "Killer. He's not," Clara said, more certain than she felt. "He's just a man." Jed stepped closer. The whiskey on his breath hit her before his hand did. The slap knocked her sideways. The tin cup fell, spilling into the dirt. "You think you can disobey me? Make me look like a fool?" "He was dying," she cried, stumbling to her feet. Yet's voice dropped, low and cold. "And now you are too." He dragged her back to the house by her hair, his fury boiling over. Their children hid in the corner, too small to stop him, too afraid to speak. Clara reached for them, but Jed shoved her out the back door and into the night. The sky had turned a dusky purple as he loaded her into the wagon. Her arms were bound, her mouth gagged with a torn dishcloth. She struggled, sobbed, begged behind. Muffled cries, but no one heard her. He drove them out past the canyon ridge, where the buzzards circled and no one traveled. There, in the silence of the desert, he threw her from the wagon like a sack of grain. "You made your choice, Clara," he growled, shoveling at the dry ground. "You chose a stranger over your own husband." She kicked and thrashed, trying to scream through the gag. Her eyes locked on the stars above, blinking through tears. He was really going to do it. He was going to bury her, and he did. Jed shoveled dirt over her limp body until her breath grew faint and the sky disappeared. The weight of the earth crushed her chest. Darkness swallowed her. And just when she thought her heart would stop beating, the storm came. Rain. It was the first real rain in weeks, and it soaked the dry Texas soil like a flood. Thunder cracked in the distance. The ground above her softened, and Clara, half-conscious, clinging to something deeper than life, started to move. Her fingers broke through the loosened dirt first. Then her hand. Then her gasping mouth, choking on mud and rainwater. She dragged herself out of the grave like something born again, covered in blood and soil and trembling with rage and fear and a will that refused to die. Somewhere behind her, Jed rode back to the house, certain he'd buried the last of her kindness. But Clara wasn't dead, not yet, and the man she saved wasn't done either. Not by a long shot. Bo McAllister awoke to the sound of wind rattling old boards and the copper. Taste of blood in his mouth. His eyelids fluttered, slow and reluctant, like they had forgotten what it meant to see. For a moment, All he knew was pain-blinding, throbbing pain that radiated from his leg and up into his spine. Every breath felt like it scraped against broken ribs, and the side of his head throbbed with a pulsing ache. Then the memory hit him. Like a runaway horse, the ambush, the gunshot, the voice telling him to leave the deed or die where he lay. He hadn't died. At least, not yet. He blinked again, adjusting to the dimness of the shack around him. It wasn't more than a crumbling trapper's shelter, abandoned long ago, with holes in the roof and no door on the hinges. A pile of dry grass beneath him had been arranged into a crude bed, and a blanket had been draped over his chest. Not his blanket, not his doing. Someone had saved him. Slowly, Bo turned his head, wincing at the fire that shot through his neck. A rusted tin cup sat just a few feet away, still damp inside. He remembered the cool taste of water, a gentle hand helping him lift his head, a soft voice whispering, "You're not gonna die, not today." The woman, she wasn't a dream. Bo struggled to sit upright, every bone in his body objecting. His right leg was splinted with 2 branches and a belt, not the work of a passerby. Someone had taken the time to bind it, to help him. He didn't know who she was or where she'd gone, but he knew one thing clear as daylight. If she hadn't come, he'd be a corpse in the dirt right now, and whoever she was in danger. He had seen her face kind, worried, brave. She wasn't the type to walk away from a wounded stranger, even when it put her at risk. And a woman that kind in a place this cruel? She wouldn't be safe. He gritted his teeth and swung his good leg over the side of the pallet. The movement sent white-hot pain stabbing up his side, but he welcomed it. It meant he was still alive. Alive enough to fight. His hat was missing, as was his revolver, but someone had left behind a walking stick and old broom handle. He leaned on it like it was made of iron and took his first step. It felt like dragging his body through a war, but Bo had survived worse. He wasn't a soft man. He hadn't built the Triple M ranch with weak hands or weak will. And now, he had a reason beyond land or cattle. Whoever that woman was, she had risked everything to save him. And that meant he owed her everything. Hours later, under the hot afternoon sun, Bo made his way back toward the edge of town. He moved slowly, painfully, but his eyes were alert now, scanning every wagon, every rider, every face he passed. But he didn't see her. Only the normal bustle of a Texas town, pretending it wasn't full of secrets. He made his way to the doctor's office, where Doc Harlan stared at him like a ghost had walked through the door. "Bo McAllister?" The old man muttered, half in disbelief. "Boy, we heard you were dead." Bo dropped into the chair with a grunt. "Not yet. But somebody tried damn hard." The doctor examined him quickly, muttering curses under his breath. "Bullet grazed. Your ribs, broke one. Legs fractured clean, but not shattered. Whoever patched you up wasn't a fool." "Was a woman," Bo said quietly. "Didn't get her name." Doc paused, eyes narrowing. "You mean Jed Clary's wife?" "There was talk she was seen near the old ridge, someone matching her looks. But she disappeared same day you were found shot." Bo's jaw tensed. Jed Clary. The name stirred trouble in every saloon and saddle house from here to Abilene. A drunk, a bully. And if what Doc said was true, a would-be murderer. "She saved me," Bo said, voice like steel. "And now she's gone." He leaned forward, eyes locked on the doctor's. "I don't care what stories are flying around. That woman gave me back my life, and I'm gonna return the favor, even if I have to drag Jed Clary through hell to do it." Outside the office, the sun was setting over the hills, casting long shadows across the land. Bo McAllister stood in the doorway, battered but unbroken, a vow burning in his chest. She'd saved his life once. Now it was his turn to save hers. The rain had saved her. Not just her body, but her soul. Clara Clary trudged through the chaparral like a ghost in a torn dress, mud streaking her legs, hair plastered to her face. Her hands were bloodied, nails split, palms torn from digging herself out of the grave Jed had thrown her into. Her throat ached from screaming into dirt that didn't listen. Her lungs burned from the dust and rain and fear. But she was alive. Every step she took through the canyon was a victory. The storm that had loosened the earth now soaked her clothes. Her shoes had vanished somewhere in the night. All she carried was the instinct to move forward, away from Jed, away from that grave, away from the life she once called hers. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. Lightning flashed behind her, lighting up the path like a warning, but she didn't turn back. Never again. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go home. Not back to that small farmhouse, to the children she loved and the husband who tried to kill her. Jed would be furious when he realized the grave was empty. He would hunt her. Clara stumbled up a rocky slope, her knees buckling, arms trembling from exhaustion. A cactus tore her sleeve, leaving a long red welt on her forearm. She didn't cry. She'd already used up all her tears. By the time dawn broke, painting the desert with the faint gold of survival, Clara collapsed beneath a fallen cottonwood tree. Her heart pounded wildly, but her mind stayed sharp. She knew these lands. She'd grown up near them. There was an old mining shack north of the dry creek, abandoned since the silver dried up. If she could reach it, she might rest. Just for a little while. It took hours to crawl the final miles. Her body screamed. Her legs gave out more than once, but her will refused to break. And finally, as the sun rose higher, she saw the old shack's crumbling silhouette. She pushed open the weather-worn door and fell inside. The air smelled of dust and mice, but it was sheltered. Safe for now. She found a faded wool blanket and wrapped herself in it. Then she curled into the corner and closed her eyes, not in peace, but in preparation. 3 days passed. Clara rationed a handful of dried beans she found in a rusted tin, boiled over a fire she built with shaking hands. She drank rainwater, caught in an old pan outside. Her fever broke the second night, sweat soaking her dress. She dreamed of her children, Sarah's curls, Tommy's laughter, and woke up with a choked sob caught in her throat. She wanted to see them more than anything. But she knew Jed. He wouldn't hesitate to use them as bait. If she went back, she'd never make it out again. So Clara made a plan. She tore the hem of her dress and used it to bind her hands, her ribs. She cut her hair with a rusted blade until it barely brushed her ears. Then she fashioned herself a crude hat from a torn feed sack. She was no longer Jed Clary's wife. That woman had been buried. Now she was Mae Carter, and Mae was not afraid. 2 days later, Clara Mae walked into a small trading post nestled at the edge of a ridgeline town, limping slightly, chin held high. The shopkeeper, a one-eyed woman named Nettie, gave her a long look and asked no questions. Nettie had seen women like her before, bruised souls running from bruised men. "You work for your supper?" Nettie asked. "I can cook, sew, sweep, and trap rats," Mae replied, her voice steady. Nettie grunted. "You're hired." For the first time in years, Clara slept in a bed without fear of fists in the dark. She scrubbed floors, patched worn blankets, and kept her head down. The work was hard, but fair. No one asked about her past, and she offered no stories. But every time a man walked through the door with a drawl like Yet's, her heart jumped. Every time a rider came down the road, she peeked through the curtains, ready to run. And every night, she remembered the wounded man she had tried to save. The rancher. She didn't even know his name. Was he alive? Had her mercy meant anything? Or had Jed buried them both? Clara didn't know. But somewhere deep inside her, where fire still smoldered beneath the ashes, she hoped he had lived. Because If he had, maybe just maybe someone out there still knew she existed, and maybe he was looking. Bo McAllister wasn't a man who liked waiting, especially not when a woman's life might be hanging in the balance. 2 weeks had passed since he dragged himself out of that shack with one good leg and a ribcage held together by grit and bandages. He was healing slowly, too slowly for his liking. But each morning he forced himself to stand, to walk a little farther, to ask a few more questions. What he'd learned so far told him enough. The woman who saved his life hadn't vanished. She'd been made to disappear. The locals didn't speak of it openly, but Bo had been raised on the smell of lies and silence. His pa used to say, "It ain't what folks say that tells the truth, it's what they won't." No one had seen Clara Clary in weeks. The children were staying with a cousin out near the river. Jed Clary claimed she ran off in the night after one of her spells. And just like that, a whole town chose not to look too hard. Bo sat on the creaky steps of the livery stable, chewing on a blade of hay, his hat low over his brow. He'd already stopped by the saloon, the general store, the blacksmith's. Folks gave polite nods, made small talk, and avoided his eyes the moment he asked about Clara. But then came Danny, the boy with 2 big boots and 2 small shoulders, running errands for the store. Bo noticed him loitering just a little too long near the edge of the stable, watching him. "Nervous? You need something, son?" Bo asked gently. Danny shifted from foot to foot, glancing around like he might get whipped just for speaking. Then, in a whisper, he said, "I saw him." "Saw who?" "Mr. Clary. The night Miss Clara disappeared. He had something in a tarp, dragging it toward the canyon ridge." Bo's chest clenched. "You? Tell anybody?" Danny shook his head hard. "Mama said don't talk. She said yet's got friends. Said it was safer if we forgot it." Bo stood slowly, wincing as pain sparked up his leg. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver coin, enough to feed the boy's family for a week. "You did right, Danny. That's for your trouble. If anyone asks, you didn't say a word." Danny nodded and disappeared like smoke. Later that afternoon, Bo made his way to Sheriff Tillman's office, a dusty place with 1 holding cell, 2 wanted posters, and the laziest deputy this side of the Rio Grande. Tillman was old, slow to speak, and not one to stir trouble unless it knocked on his door. Bo didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm here about Clara Clary." Tillman leaned back in his chair. "Ain't seen her in weeks. Jed says she lit out, same as before." Bo's jaw tightened. "He tried to kill her. That's a mighty big accusation. And I'm a mighty big man with nothing left to lose," Bo growled. "She saved my life, bandaged me, fed me water, near got herself caught. Now she's gone, and no one's asking why." Tillman studied him a long moment. "Even if you're right, what proof you got?" Bo tipped his hat back. "Not yet, but I plan to find it." That night, under cover of darkness, Bo rode out alone toward the canyon ridge. His horse moved slow, careful over the uneven ground. The moon was thin, casting pale light across the rocks and thorn brush. Bo scanned every inch of terrain until something caught his eye, a patch of earth not like the rest. Disturbed. Looser. He dismounted and knelt beside it. He didn't dig deep. He didn't have to. Just below the surface he found a strip of torn calico cloth, the kind women wore for aprons. Dried blood crusted the edge. Nearby, a shattered hair comb lay half buried in the dirt. Bo sat back on his heels, heart pounding. She had been buried here. But she wasn't here anymore. She'd gotten out. He stood slowly, holding the blood-stained cloth in one hand. A new certainty settled in his gut, cold, dangerous, determined. Clara Clary wasn't dead, and that meant 2 things. First, Jed Clary had failed. And second, Bo McAllister wasn't just going to find Clara. He was going to drag Jed into the bay. Light and make damn sure this time he was the one who didn't walk away. The wind in the high country felt different, cooler, cleaner. It carried no memory of her husband's boots thudding across floorboards, no sharp scent of spilled whiskey, no screams. Just the quiet rustle of pine trees and the snap of flags on. The porch of the remote trading post nestled at the edge of the high pass. Clara no. She reminded herself Mae Carter had made it farther than she ever dreamed she could. The journey north had taken 6 days. She'd bartered scraps of silver buttons for a seat on a freight wagon, then walked 20 miles through brush and chill wind. Each mile hardened her. Her hands grew calloused from gripping her walking stick, her cheeks burned red from the sun, but she didn't complain. Every ache in her body was proof that she had survived. She was no longer the woman who whispered apologies after flinching at her husband's voice, no longer the one who fed the children in silence while nursing bruises under her sleeves. Clary was dead. Mae Carter had work to do. The Gibson Pass trading post was run by a sharp-eyed widow named Mavis Darnell, whose gray bun was tighter than most jailhouse knots. When Mae walked in, eyes lowered, shoulders stiff, Mavis took one glance and nodded slowly like she'd seen 100 women just like her. Maybe she had. "You runnin' from something?" Mavis asked. Mae swallowed. "Just want to earn my keep," Mavis grunted. "Cook? Yes, ma'am. Clean? I'll do twice what the last girl did and won't talk back." Mavis liked that answer. Rooms upstairs. Breakfast at dawn. Dishes done by noon. Don't steal. Don't cry. Don't open the door after dark. I won't. By the end of the week, Mae had earned more than Mavis's trust. She'd earned the quiet respect of the rough traders, hunters, and freight drivers who passed through. She didn't speak much. She moved like a shadow and worked like a mule. She learned how to shoot from an old trapper named Wallace, who noticed the way her eyes darted every time someone said, "Clary." "Whoever he is," Wallace said, handing her a pistol, "you ought to be ready if he shows up." "I plan to be," Mae replied. Each evening after her chores were done, Mae practiced in the woods. Her aim was rough at first, but she was stubborn. She taught herself to move quiet, to track footfalls, to listen to the forest instead of fearing it. The girl who once ducked under her husband's raised fist now stood tall with a revolver at her hip, on a particularly cold morning while sweeping. Snow from the porch, Mae heard voices through the crackling wind. 2 freight haulers were drinking coffee by the fire barrel, talking low and slow. "You hear about that rancher got himself shot near Bowie Ridge?" one asked. "Yabo McAllister, right? Some say he's back now. He's looking for someone." Mae's broom stopped. "Reckon he's tracking the Clary woman. Word is she helped him before she vanished." Mae's hands trembled. He was alive. She hadn't buried a dying man, she'd saved him. And now he was searching for her. She returned to her sweeping without saying a word, but her heart was pounding. Bo McAllister. She hadn't known his name, only his wounds, only the gratitude in his eyes when she gave him water. Could he really be trying to find her? She should have felt fear that anyone searching for her might lead Jed to her door, but she didn't. She felt seen. Someone remembered she was alive. Someone was looking. That night, Mae sat at the window of her room, moonlight silvering her face, the cold pistol resting in her lap. She thought of her children, Sarah with her missing front tooth and Tommy's soft curls. She missed them like missing a part of herself. But she had to be smart. She couldn't go back until it was safe. Until Jed couldn't hurt them through her. Until he paid. And maybe, if Bo McAllister truly was alive and searching, maybe she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe mercy hadn't been a mistake. Maybe it had been the start of something bigger than fear. She tightened her grip on the pistol and whispered into the dark, "I'm not done yet either." The snow was melting. Spring came late in the high country, but Bo McAllister had learned that even the hardest winters couldn't hold forever, not if you kept moving forward. He rode into Gibson Pass under a slate-gray sky, dusted with sleet and questions. His leg ached with every jolt of the saddle, but he kept his pace steady. Months had passed since he'd clawed his way back to life, and he wasn't about to stop when he was finally this close. He had followed rumor and hunches, bartered with scouts, traded cattle for information, and followed the faintest trail of a woman no one wanted to talk about. Some said she was a ghost. Others said she had died. But Bo had seen her, felt her hand on his brow, her voice whispering mercy when he was bleeding into the earth. He knew she was alive. And now, as he dismounted outside the Gibson Pass trading post, he knew he'd found her trail again. Mavis Darnell squinted at him over her spectacles. "You ain't no trapper, and you sure as hell don't look like a peddler." "No, ma'am," Bo said, brushing snow from his coat. "I'm just a rancher, looking for a woman who saved my life." Mavis tilted her head. "Most men ride the other direction from that. She ain't most women." Silence passed between them like a test. Finally, Mavis gave a slow nod. "You sit. I'll see if she's ready to see you." Upstairs, May Carter dropped the pot she was holding when she heard Mavis's words. "He's here," the older woman said quietly, eyes kind but firm. "Rancher said you saved him. Said he's been looking for you since the day you vanished." May's heart stopped. She had imagined this moment so many times. Bo McAllister, appearing like a figure out of a half-remembered dream. But now that he was real, now that he was here, fear flooded back. Not fear of him, but of what his presence might mean. If he found her, could Jed? "He doesn't look like trouble," Mavis said softly. "He looks like someone with a broken leg and a heavier heart." May wiped her hands on her apron, her breath trembling in her chest. "Send him in." Bo stepped into the room, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Clara Mae stood by the window, hands gripping the sill. Her hair was shorter, her cheeks thinner, but her eyes were still fierce, still full of that same fire that had defied death in a canyon grave. "You're alive," she whispered. "So are you," he said. "Thought I might have imagined you out there." "I thought you were dying." He limped closer, removing his hat. "I was." You stopped that. A silence hung in the room, not awkward, not uncertain. Just full of things that didn't need saying. "Why'd you come?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Bo's jaw worked, and when he spoke, it was with the quiet conviction of a man who'd found purpose in pain. "Because I owe you my life. And because I don't believe a woman like you should have to keep running." She turned toward him, arms crossed tightly. "You don't know what Yet's capable of." "I know he tried to bury you alive," Bo said, voice steady. "I found the place. I saw the blood. You clawed your way out of the ground, Clara. That makes you stronger than him." She blinked, eyes misting. No one had said her name like that in months, not like it mattered. Not like she mattered, he went on. "I've spoken to the sheriff. I've got friends in places Jed can't reach. If you want to testify, I'll stand beside you. If you want to disappear, I'll help you do that too." "I don't want to hide anymore," she said quietly. Bo stepped closer. "Then you don't have to." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed of how easily her strength buckled. Bo touched her shoulder gently. "You don't have to be strong all the time." Her voice cracked. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "Yes, you do," he said. "You're the woman who gave a dying man water when she had nothing left to give. You're the woman who survived a grave. That's who you are." A long silence passed. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "Let's finish this." Clara sat at the small kitchen table in Mavis Darnell's upstairs room. Her fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug gone cold hours ago. The fire had burned low, casting flickers of orange and gold on the walls, but her eyes stayed locked on the piece of paper in front of her. It wasn't much. Just 4 sheets torn from an old ledger. But what she wrote on those pages could change everything. Bo had come back the next morning with a folder of legal papers, letters of character, and a rough sketch of a plan. Clara didn't want revenge, she wanted justice. Not just for herself, but for her children, and for every woman who'd ever been told to shut her mouth or take a beating quietly. She had insisted the truth come from her, not hidden in whispers, not filtered through someone else's story. That's how the letter had started. To Sheriff Tillman and any man brave enough to stand between right and wrong. In her neatest hand, Clara wrote out every detail. What Jed had done to her, how long it had gone on, and what happened the night he tried to kill her. She included names of neighbors who had turned blind eyes, moments the sheriff may have overheard threats, bruises the preacher's wife had noticed but never mentioned aloud. She wrote about the grave, the cold dirt, the storm that gave her back. Her breath. By the time she reached the last page, her hands were shaking. But her voice in ink had never been steadier. Bo read the letter in silence. When he finished, he folded it with care and met her eyes. "That's the truth," he said softly. "Yes," she whispered, "all of it." Together, they rode into the neighboring town of Cold Ridge, a quieter settlement with a new sheriff, who wasn't under Jed Clary's thumb. The journey took half a day through winding trails and melting snow, but Clara never once looked back. Sheriff Harmon was a clean-cut man with no patience for cowards. When Bo presented the letter, Harmon read it twice. Then he picked up his pen. "This is enough to start an investigation," he said. "I'll ride out to Bowie myself." Clara reached into her coat and pulled out the final piece, the torn, blood-stained apron cloth Bo had dug up from the canyon. She laid it on the desk like an offering. Sheriff Harmon stared at it for a long time. "You got grit, ma'am, I'll give you that." She didn't smile. "I've got 2 children. I want them to grow up knowing what's right. That starts with this." He nodded. "We'll handle it right. Quiet, no warning, no chance for him to run." Back in Gibson Pass, Clara paced the trading post while Bo sat with a map and marked the route they'd ride when it was time to bring the children home. Not yet, but soon. At dusk, Mavis came in carrying a telegram. "Just came in," she said. From Sheriff Harmon. Bo opened it slowly. "Warrant. Secured. Jed Clary to be arrested at dawn. No leaks. Tell her she's safe now." Clara took the message in both hands and stared at it like it was written in gold. Safe. She repeated the word in her mind, over and over. It didn't quite feel real yet, but it was coming. For the first time in her life, a man would be held accountable for what he did to a woman, and that woman was her. That night, Clara and Bo sat outside under the stars, the wind soft and quiet. The fire crackled between them. "You think it'll stick?" she asked. "You think a jury'll believe me?" Bo looked at her with that steady, calm gaze of his. "It doesn't matter if they believe every word right now. What matters is, you stood up. You showed him you're not afraid." "I was afraid," she whispered. "So was I," he said, "until you gave me water. Mercy's stronger than fear." She smiled faintly. "You say that like you mean it." "I do." He reached across the fire and gently touched her hand. "Tomorrow your past starts getting buried," he said. "For good this time. And not with you in it." The canyon looked different in the light. No longer a place of terror. It stood quiet and still under the morning sun, just dirt, rock, and the dry hush of wind weaving through the brush. But for Clara, every step toward it felt like walking into the mouth of something that once tried to devour her whole. Bo rode beside her in silence, his presence steady as ever. Sheriff Harmon followed on horseback, along with 2 deputies and the town's new circuit judge, who had insisted on seeing the evidence with his own eyes. Word of Jed Clary's arrest had been kept under lock and key, no leaks, no warning. Harmon made sure of it. Now they had come to dig up the truth. Clara dismounted first. The dirt crunched beneath her boots as she walked toward the shallow ridge where Jed had left her to die. Her pulse roared in her ears, but she kept going, eyes fixed on the disturbed patch of earth that had never quite blended back into the desert. Bo handed her the spade. "You sure you want to do it?" She nodded. "I have to." She pushed the blade into the dry ground and began to dig. Each shovelful came easier than the last, not because the dirt was soft, but because she was stronger now. She wasn't burying herself this time. She was unearthing the truth. Within minutes, she hit the remnants she remembered all too well. A scrap of torn apron, faded with blood. The rusted comb she'd worn the day she was attacked. The dishcloth that had gagged her, knotted tight as a snake. Gasps passed between the men behind her, but Clara didn't flinch. She lifted the items one by one and laid them on a folded canvas tarp. Her hands didn't shake. The judge stepped forward, grave as a tombstone. "It's enough. Between this and her written statement, we can hold him until trial, maybe longer." Sheriff Harmon looked to Clara. "You did good, ma'am. You did real good." She looked at the shallow grave. "I dug myself out once, but I needed this to dig him into it the right way." By the time they rode back to Bowie, the sun was high, and the heat clung to their backs like sweat and justice. Streets were quieter than usual. Word had gotten out. Clara stayed just outside town while the lawman moved in. She sat astride her mare beneath the cottonwood tree near the ridge, watching the dust rise in the distance. Bo stayed with her. Minutes later, a gunshot cracked through the still air, not a firefight, but a warning shot. Then came shouting, cursing. Sheriff Harmon emerged on horseback, dragging Jed Clary in irons behind him. The man looked more wild animal than man, face red, teeth bared, eyes darting like he still couldn't believe what was happening. When Jed saw Clara, he froze. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just sat tall in her saddle, calm and unmoving, like a mountain watching a storm pass beneath it. "You," he hissed. "You were supposed to be dead." She met his gaze, cold and steady. "I was. You failed." They paraded him through the town, through the same streets where people once turned their eyes away when Clara wore bruises on her cheek. Now they watched, silent, shamefaced. Some wept. A few nodded to her in passing, as if to say, "We see." "You now." Sheriff Harmon hauled Jed into the jailhouse. Judge Templeton followed with the evidence, and the door slammed shut behind them. Bo looked at Clara. "That's the first nail in his coffin. Feels like the last one to me." That evening, Clara stood by the window of her small room above the Mercantile, watching the glow of lanterns light up the streets. Below, townsfolk walked slower, quieter, maybe thinking, maybe changing. Bo knocked once and stepped in. "You all right?" She nodded. "I didn't know what this would feel like. I thought I'd cry or break." He waited, "But all I feel is still." Bo walked to her side and looked out the window with her. "That's peace." "No," she said softly. "Peace comes next." She turned to face him, something soft and real in her eyes. "And I think it's coming." The trial was set for the end of the week. Word spread through the towns like wildfire. Jed Clary, the man everyone once feared too much to challenge, was facing charges of attempted murder, spousal abuse, and obstruction of justice. The judge from Cold Ridge would preside, and Sheriff Harmon had deputized 2 men just to keep order during the proceedings. But Clara didn't care about the whispers, or the way people flinched when she walked past with her chin high. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for Sarah and Tommy. They waited at the river ranch just outside of town, under the care of Yet's cousin Ruthie, who had taken them in when Jed said Clara had run off again. Ruthie wasn't cruel, just scared, like the rest of them had been. But when Clara rode up the long dirt path, hair tied back, coat buttoned to her throat, and eyes that didn't belong to a scared woman anymore, Ruthie went pale. Clara dismounted without a word. She didn't ask permission. She knocked once then. Stepped into the house. Sarah saw her first. She froze in the doorway, the rag doll in her arms slipping to the floor. "Mama?" Tommy turned to, his chubby hands full of cornbread. He blinked, uncertain. Clara's heart broke in 1,000 pieces, but she kept her spine straight. "Hi, babies." Sarah ran first, sobbing into Clara's skirt. Tommy followed, holding on to her leg like he never wanted to let go again. Ruthie stood nearby, wringing her hands. He said you died." "I did," Clara said gently, kneeling to hug her children tight, "but I came back." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't hide them this time. She let her children feel the truth of her in their arms. Let them bury their faces in her neck and cry out the confusion and hurt they hadn't had words for. "You ain't never leavin' again?" Tommy whispered. "No," Clara promised. "Mama's here to stay, and nobody's ever gonna hurt me or you again." She spent the next 2 days with them at Mavis's place, reading old picture books by the fire, brushing Sarah's hair, and helping Tommy unlearn the silence he'd grown used to. At night, she curled up between them, listening to the sound of their steady breathing, her arms around both their small, warm bodies. Bo came by only once, bringing them bread and a basket of honey pears. He didn't speak much, just tipped his hat and smiled faintly as the children clung to Clara's sides like barnacles. Later that night, Clara told him the truth. They saw it, Bo, not just the bruises. They heard the screaming. They watched. "My fault." Bo's voice was quiet. "They also saw you rise." The morning of the trial, the courtroom was packed wall to wall. Miners, traders, shopkeepers, even the preacher all came. Some out of curiosity, some perhaps out of guilt. Jed Clary sat behind the defense table in iron cuffs, his face hollow and jaw twitching. He looked like a man watching his empire crumble, because that's exactly what was happening. Clara sat across from him, her children safely outside under the care of Ruthie and Mavis. She wore a plain brown dress, no makeup, no frills, just honesty. When the judge asked if she was ready to testify, she rose and stepped to the front. Her voice never wavered. She told the truth, every detail. From the first slap to the last breath she took beneath 6 inches of earth. She described the storm that saved her, the stranger she'd saved in return, and the mercy that led to her rebirth. She described her children's faces, their fear, their silence, and how it wasn't just herself she had to save, but them, too. The room was silent when she finished. The judge leaned forward, hands folded. "Mrs. Clary, do you fear any further retaliation?" "No," Clara said calmly. "I buried my fear, just like he tried to bury me." Later that afternoon, as the jury filed out and the sun began to set, Sheriff Harmon handed down the decision. Jed Clary would stand trial in Cold Ridge County for attempted murder. Bail denied. As Jed was dragged from the room, he looked back at Clara one last time. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were empty. She didn't look away because she had nothing left to fear. The trial was behind her. Jed was behind bars, awaiting transfer to Cold Ridge for a formal sentencing. The town of Bowie, once blind to Clara Clary's bruises and silences, now treated her like something sacred. Soft-spoken shopkeepers pressed ribbons into her daughter's hands. Men removed their hats when she passed, and a handful of women began whispering their own truths behind church walls. But Clara wasn't looking back. Any more doubts? She had three things now: her name, her children, and a future she wasn't afraid of. Bo McAllister stood outside the livery, one hand resting on the saddle horn of a chestnut gelding. He was packing light a bedroll, coffee tin, small bag of feed. Clara approached slowly, Tommy perched on her hip and Sarah trailing behind holding a handmade cloth satchel. "You're leavin'?" she asked. He turned with that slow, steady half smile she was beginning to crave more than air. "Only if you say no." "No to what?" He stepped forward and offered her a folded piece of paper. She opened it. A land deed, signed in his name, with one line beneath, co-owner, Clara Mae Carter. Her hands trembled. "I bought a little place near Pine Hollow. Quiet land, water runs clean, enough room for 3 horses, a garden, and whatever else we decide to grow. I can build a second house if you want space. I'm not a skin for your hand unless you're offering. But I figured maybe you and the kids needed somewhere no man could ever bury you again." She stared at the paper, at his boots, at the dust between them, and then back at his eyes. "You're serious?" As the sunrise. Sarah tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, will there be chickens?" Bo crouched beside her. "Darling, you can name the rooster. I don't mind being second in command." Clara laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. She folded the deed slowly, tucked it into her pocket, and looked him in the eye. "You don't need to build a second house. We're not broken anymore. We're just starting." He stood, almost afraid to smile. Then she added, "But I will name the rooster." A week later, they rode out of Bowie as a family. Mavis stood on the porch of the trading post, waving with one hand and wiping her eyes with the other. Sheriff Harmon tipped his hat. Even Ruthie came to send them off, tears in her eyes as Sarah clung to her and whispered promises to write. Clara rode between her children and Bo, her spine straight, her face turned toward the sun. Her hair was pinned neatly beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Her pistol rested on her hip, not out of fear, but pride. She no longer walked like a woman who survived a storm. She rode like a woman who had become one. That night, beneath a blanket of stars, they camped near the river bend, firelight flickering across their sleeping children. Bo poured her coffee and said, "You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never helped me?" She shook her head. "No, because I'd still be dead or invisible. You were the first man I ever saved, and the first one who thought I was worth saving too." Bo looked across the fire, voice low. "You don't owe me nothing, Clara." "I know," she said, "but I love you anyway." He went still, as if the wind itself had hushed to listen. Then he rose, walked around the fire, and knelt in front of her, not with a ring, but with 2 calloused hands gently cupping hers. Then, "Let's build something better," he said. "Not out of what we lost, but out of what we found." She nodded, her smile soft and sure. "I already started," she whispered. "I started the day I clawed out of that grave." A year later, at the edge of Pine Hollow, the ranch had grown into something more than land and lumber. It had laughter. It had chickens. It had a boy who ran faster than the wind and a girl who named every flower in the garden. And it had Clara, no longer Clary. Never again. Her name now was Clara Mae McAllister, and every sunrise on that ranch was proof she hadn't just survived, she'd lived.